It is such a good day. We have our 8:30 service and our 11 o'clock service now, and we are starting a new sermon series today, and that sermon series is going to be a little bit different. I know that a lot of people come, especially in modern settings, and when we come and we hear a sermon, what we're mainly asking is, what do you want me to do? Just tell me what to do, and then let me go have that meal that June made our mouth water with during the children's moment, right? Well, I have this conviction that I firmly believe that the real issue is not that we don't know what to do or that we do things we're not supposed to do, but that the reason we don't do what we're supposed to do is because we don't know who we're supposed to be. And if we really knew who we were, then our behavior would flow out of our identity. And so this new sermon series that we're going to be preaching over the next several weeks is called Identity Theft, because I believe that our identity spiritually is threatened all the time. And we need to talk about how. We need to talk about why. We need to talk about the identity that God made for each of us to live into and the lies that seek to deceive us out of that so that we would believe that we're really not the person God created us to be, when His voice is trying to cut through the mix and say, yes, you are. Yes, you are. This is who you are. So have you ever had your identity stolen? I have. And it's a horrible experience, isn't it? And my first thought was probably, I never thought this would happen to me. Do you remember feeling that way? I mean, yes, I know identity theft is a thing, but it happened to me when we were in seminary. And I said in a recent sermon that seminary is not a time when you aspire to be financially well, you know. I didn't know we had any money for anybody to steal, but lo and behold, I was looking at the statements, and there was a substantial amount, especially for us at that time, a substantial amount charged to our credit card. And there was actually a Western Union out in California that contacted us and said, we wanted to alert you because we thought that this was a bit unusual with your activity. We wanted to make sure that this is you and that everything's okay. And I said, well, no, actually this wasn't me, and I don't think everything is okay. So I need you to tell me what to do. And they said, well, it looks like your identity has been compromised. Isn't it interesting what we are told is our identity? We're told that our social security number and our credit score and all of our bank accounts and all of that is our identity. And I can't help but think that our social security number is not written in the Lamb's Book of Life, right? And when we approach the pearly gates, St. Peter is not going to check his roll and say, can you tell me your credit score again? Now that's good news for somebody here. I don't know who I'm preaching to, but that's good news to somebody, right? But they told me that I needed to contact these 3 credit bureaus, which I had never contacted before, and now I have the numbers to Equifax and Experian and TransUnion all saved in my phone if I ever need them again. And then they told me to contact my local police department. Now, y'all, we were living in Wilmore, Kentucky. And the best way I know to describe Wilmore is that it was kind of like Mayberry. Wilmore makes Robertsdale look like a metropolis, okay? The police department was on Main Street because Main Street was like the only street with anything on it, and it was all the way at the end, and so I was expecting to find Andy Griffith and Barney Fife themselves. And I walked in, there were only 2 officers, they weren't Andy Griffith and Barney Fife, but they calmed me down so effectively. I was so grateful. Have you ever had this experience where you have like this life crisis and you need law enforcement, and they're just so cool and calm and collected? And I don't know if it's because they've seen so much that they're desensitized, or if they just know, hey, this is your problem. But I think pastors could really learn from their ability just to settle you down. And I went back to my car and I felt so much better, and as I sat there ready to leave, I realized they didn't tell me anything about what to do next. I have no idea what's going to happen or how to follow up. They just kind of gave me this sense that everything was going to be okay. And lo and behold, a few days later, the money was transferred back into my account from the Western Union out in California. So I called the Wilmore PD and I said, hey, I noticed the money is back. Is there anything else I need to do? They said, no, Mr. Hart, we took care of it. All you need to do is have a great day. The Wilmore PD is my heroes. And the Western Union out in California, because even though they didn't get the money that was stolen from me, they gave it back to me because they knew that it had been stolen. So in this moment when I had my identity stolen, I felt all of these feelings on the screen. I felt violated and lost. In many cases, you can feel frozen because there are things that you can't do. I mean, so much of our life is tied to our finances. If you want to pay your bills or buy a house, you can't do all that when your identity is compromised. I felt insecure and vulnerable. I felt harassed and helpless. When I think about those last 2 words, those sound familiar because I think I remember those words coming out of the mouth of Jesus. Do you? He saw them, that they were harassed and helpless. In Matthew 9:36, Jesus looks out at the crowd and he has compassion, and he says they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Like sheep without a shepherd. I wonder what makes you feel harassed and helpless and vulnerable and anxious. Well, Jesus paints the metaphor for us that when we feel that way, it's like we're a sheep without a shepherd. And so what I've come to tell you today is, for better or worse, we were all created to be sheep. We were. You and I are sheep. We were made to be sheep. We believe this lie that we're supposed to be independent, self-sufficient human beings. Haven't you heard that before? I mean, aren't we told as parents that we have been successful parents when we train up our kids to be independent, self-sufficient human beings? And I believe to a point that's true. I mean, they need to become that so that we no longer have to micromanage their life. But I believe that we are only successful as parents and as evangelists and disciple makers when we teach people to be dependent on the voice of the shepherd. We never outgrow that because we're sheep, and sheep always need a shepherd. The question is, whose voice is leading us? Not are we being led. So the good news, for better or worse, is that you were made to be sheep, but you were not made to be sheep without a shepherd. And Jesus says if you feel that way, if you feel harassed and helpless, if you feel like a sheep without a shepherd, you're not made to stay that way. He has something for us today. And in the Gospel of John, chapter 10, Phyllis read some verses from this passage, and I want to expand it a little bit and look at verses 1 through 11. Jesus says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter by the door into the fold of the sheep, but climbs up some other way, he is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is a shepherd of the sheep. To him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. When he puts forth all his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. A stranger they simply will not follow, but they will flee from him because they do not know the voice of strangers." This figure of speech Jesus spoke to them, but they didn't understand what those things were which he had been saying to them. So Jesus said to them again, "Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture. The thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I came that they might have life and have it to the full, have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep." Now I have to be honest. I don't know anything about sheep. Like nothing. So I had to do a lot of homework, and I'm going to feel all pent up inside if I don't get to share the homework that I did learning about sheep. So indulge me for just a few minutes. What was Jesus saying? Well, when I picture shepherds, I picture like the ancient Near East of the Old Testament, where shepherds are wandering around with huge flocks of livestock just out in the open desert with no shelter for miles and miles. And this actually is not the context into which Jesus is speaking. I've got the wrong picture in my head. The picture that should be in my head in Jesus' day is actually a village society. And in a village society, you had all these homes clustered together, these homesteads, where 3 and 4 generations would all live together in the same house, and the humans would live inside the home. And outside the home, there would be kind of this courtyard area, or what we would call a yard, where the sheep live. And then there would be kind of a gate, where if someone came to the gate, the sheep would be between them and the family in the house, and they would have to answer to the doorkeeper, who would then let them in if they were familiar to the family and that kind of thing. And the shepherds were actually children. All the villagers would appoint one of the sons of the village, or maybe 2 daughters of the village, and the shepherd would come to the door and have to answer to the doorkeeper, "I'm the shepherd, it's me, the shepherd." And the sheep would recognize the shepherd's voice. The doorkeeper would let the shepherd in. And then, not only did the sheep recognize the shepherd's voice, but the shepherd knew all their names. And he would call each sheep by name, and then he would move to the next house and gather those sheep. And then he would move to the next house, and all the sheep of the village would follow the shepherd out into the open country for the day so they could graze and pasture. And if they had to go really far where they couldn't make it back, and they had to stay overnight, they had these shelters built up in the open country, and they were often round and made of stone, and the top was open. So the shepherd would put thorns over the top. Why do you think the shepherd would do that? Natural barbed wire to keep predators out. So the predators, or anybody else for that matter, oh sorry, that wasn't as loud when I practiced, would have to enter through the door. And in the village, when someone would come to pick up the sheep, they knew they couldn't get through the door because there was a doorkeeper. And so as Jesus said, thieves and robbers have to climb in some other way. But even if you climbed in the yard through some other way, you would be calling, even if you overheard the shepherd call their names and you knew the names of the sheep, you'd sit there and go, here Bob, here Dan, here Janie, come on, sheep, sheep, sheep. And they would just stand there. Why? Because you're not the shepherd. And they know their shepherd's voice. And they're not just going to follow you out. So then you get out in the open country, and how can Jesus say, I am the shepherd and I am the door at the same time? Well, like this. If you've never done this and you're physically able, you should try this. It is very relaxing. The shelters out in the open country didn't have doors. The opening was left open, and the shepherd himself would prop up in the door, because if the sheep tried to escape, who were they going to run into? The shepherd. They also would see the shepherd, and it would comfort them, so they would stay in unless they were stubborn, which sheep can be, and they would have to step over so he would put them back. Likewise, if predators want to get to the sheep, you guys are my sheep for the day, who do they have to go through? The shepherd. Now, it wasn't common that a shepherd would die in the service of being a shepherd, but they got really good at fending off predators. I think of King David as a boy. What did he say to Goliath when he challenged him? He said, the same God that gave me victory over the lion and the bear will give me victory over you. Because David had defeated lions and bears out protecting his sheep. So Jesus says, I am the shepherd, and I am the door. And if anyone wants to come in, if anyone wants to come to God, if anyone wants to be saved, they have to come through me. I am the protector and preserver of their life. And that means eternal life, but I also want to tell you that has implications for our earthly life, because he's the one that guides us and calls us and leads us in this life. He's our sense of security. He's the one that keeps us from feeling vulnerable and helpless and harassed, right? When we feel like sheep without a shepherd. We're not meant to be sheep without a shepherd. We're meant to know his voice, to hear him call us by name. Did you notice how he said he leads us? It didn't say he drives us from behind. It didn't say he pokes and prods us to get us going the right way. Some of us wish he would do that. But that's not who Jesus says he is. That's not the image of the shepherd he gives us. He says he goes ahead of us and he leads us, and the sheep follow him. So the good news is you will always have leadership. There will never be a season of your life where you say, where are you, God? I just want you to lead me. And him say, I'm taking a break. Or I just want you to figure this out on your own. I'm not going to tell you or help you or be close to you in any way. We'll always have leadership, but the other side is we'll always have a choice. God's not going to stand behind us and force us and push us and prod us. He's going to lead us, because that's what good shepherds do. And what do good sheep do? Follow the shepherd. Follow the shepherd. He says in the text that all who came before him were thieves and robbers. And if you were to read John chapter 9, which is the chapter before this, you would see that Jesus heals a blind man, and the Pharisees try to get on his case as usual. And Jesus immediately turns around and tells this passage. He speaks this passage into that situation. And he says, all who came before me are thieves and robbers. Now, when we look at that verse, John 10, verse 10, the thief comes only to steal, kill, and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. Who have we always heard is the thief who comes to steal, kill, and destroy? The devil, right? Satan. Now, I'm not here to say that's false. I absolutely think the devil is a thief who comes to lure the sheep away and steal, kill, and destroy. But here's the not so great news. I don't think the devil's the only one. I think the devil uses lots of voices to try to entice and pull us away, and sometimes those voices even come from other people. Sometimes they even come from leaders. I know you're shocked. Political leaders, church leaders, community leaders, family. And here's how you tell. We will always have leaders. The Bible even says submit to authority. But when submitting to authority calls us away from following Jesus, we have a problem. Good, godly Christian leaders are those for which following them means following Jesus. Good, godly Christian leaders are those that lead us to the voice of the shepherd so that we can be helped to follow him more closely and hear him more clearly. Does that make sense? So we're going to have leadership. But Jesus says, all who come before me, anyone who would call you away from me, anyone who would call you to God on some other path is a thief and a robber, and they are actually stealing part of the identity you were meant to have away from you. You were called to be a sheep of the Good Shepherd. Now, there are many voices, and I can think of times in my life that I have thought, it's just hard to hear the voice. I want to hear the voice. And probably one of the hardest times in my life that I recall that was my freshman year of college. And I don't remember if I've said this before. Excuse me, but my freshman year of college, hold on a second, I need to cough. I'm going to turn this off. Thank you. Bless you too, thanks. My freshman year of college was the stuff that good country songs are made of. I went off to school, and I had to break up with my girlfriend. She was the only girlfriend I'd ever had. We'd had a long-time relationship, and we were trying to do the wise thing and not have a long-distance relationship, between two different schools, so we broke up. So I went to college heartbroken, and then that very first semester, my parents called and told me that my dog had died. And then just a few months later, I found out that my parents were getting a divorce. And all of this while I was pledging a fraternity, which I swore I would never do. And much of that experience was good, but much of it questioned any presence of moral fiber and integrity. And I was asking myself, where is this voice that I have followed for 18 years? And the truth is, it never left. It was really hard to hear at that time. But as I later saw and looked back on that chapter of my life, I realized that voice was right there the whole time. I'm not sure I got all the twists and turns right, and frankly, at this point, I don't think he cares, because we got out on the other side where I needed to be, and he guided me, and he led me, and he was faithful, and I can say that now. So I want you to imagine something with me, and I'm going to say one first line of this imaginative experience, and you're going to think I'm in hell, but I want you to imagine CNN and Fox News on two different TVs at the same time. And then I want you to imagine that there's another TV or a radio playing a weather report that you're listening to. And I want you to imagine that as you're listening to all this, you're responding to messages on your phone or computer or some other device. And I want you to imagine that while you're doing all that, you're also listening to your favorite music. And in the midst of all that, which is how some of us do homework, in the midst of all that, there's this one voice. And it's not yelling, and it's not screaming over all those other distractions that we're inviting into our life. It's this still small voice, and it's saying, I am the shepherd. My sheep will know my voice, and they will follow me. I am the good shepherd, because I lay my life down for the sheep. There are times in our world where we are going to have to pull back the distractions to hear that voice. Maybe for you, morning is a good time to do that. Maybe it's at night before you go to bed. Maybe there are weekly rhythms or monthly rhythms. Maybe another aspect that we're going to look at in a few weeks as we continue through this identity series is that we were also created to be members of a body, which Miss June taught about today. Did you know sheep are not meant to follow the shepherd alone? A lot of times when I read Psalm 23, it feels like such a personal psalm that I just picture me as one lone little sheep following shepherd God, and it's just the two of us. That's not how shepherds roll. They don't just take one sheep for a walk, right? Sheep are meant to be part of a flock. So if we're not flocking together with other sheep to hear the voice of the shepherd, then we're missing out on something. So there are these spiritual disciplines that help us do this. If prayer is not a regular part of your life, then we're never going to hear the voice. If we don't read what the voice has already said, maybe daily Bible reading or some kind of Bible reading plan is your next step. If we're not doing that, then we're missing out on what the voice has already said. And he continues to speak through this word even today. So there are ways, if you're looking for what to do with this message, there are ways to apply this and to seek the voice together. But make a plan to do it, and don't try to do it alone. And I promise you, God will be faithful. He says, to the one who asks, it is given. The one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks, the door will be open. So this is what I'd like to invite you to do. If you want a very practical way to apply this sermon over the next 7 days before we gather again, I want to invite you to try something. In the morning when you wake up, just take a few minutes before you do anything else, before you invite any distractions into your day. Or at night before you go to bed, clear all the distractions from your head as you prepare to rest and receive the peace of God to sleep before starting your day over. And at one or both of those times, I want you to read and pray over Psalm 23. Just that psalm. It's not long, it's 6 verses. And as Chuck did at the beginning of this service, I want you to begin preaching that psalm to your own soul. I want you to begin convincing yourself that that's who God created you to be, that you're a sheep and you were created to hear the voice of the shepherd. Just before any distractions come into your life, tell yourself, the Lord is my shepherd. He's my leader. He's my master. I shall not want. He's given me all that I need. He tells me in his word that his grace is sufficient for the day. He leads me beside the still waters. He brings order to chaos. He takes all the tumultuous busyness of my life and he makes peace out of it, and he calms me down. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. I don't have to try to just figure out on my own how to be righteous or holy. I have to watch him and I have to listen to him. And I just have to put my foot where Jesus did because he goes before me. And even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I was just part of a funeral yesterday. We spend so many days going to the funeral home or reading about death in the news. We experience darkness and brokenness and even death seemingly everywhere we go in our community. But even there, I will not be afraid. Why? Because you're with me. The shepherd's with me. And even if someone takes my life, they can never take me away from the shepherd. His rod and his staff, they comfort me. Not tools that he uses against me, tools that he uses against predators to protect me. Those that would seek to steal my identity or to convince me to listen to them and not to him. He prepares a table before me in the presence of my enemies. They can't do anything to me. They can't touch a hair on my head without the shepherd knowing about it. He feeds me. He nourishes me even when things are threatening to come against me. He anoints my head with oil. He blesses me. I'm the most blessed person on the face of the planet. Even if I'm contending with something in this life, it's only temporary. It's not something that's going to take my life forever. Because goodness and mercy will follow me all the way to the end. And then when I leave this life, I'm going to be in his house and his family forever. That's where I'm headed. That's my ultimate reality. And that reality shades everything I'm going through in this reality. Goodness and mercy. Thanks be to God. I'd invite you to do that every day for the next week. Would you pray with me? God, today, I simply pray that before we do anything, you would help us know who we are. That this week you would give each of us in this room the strength and the fortitude and the faith to combat the lies of the enemy, to push against the voices of others that would seek to tell us that we are not who you created us to be, and to hear clearly the voice of the shepherd. In Jesus' name. Amen.